Picture this. It is 4:30 in the morning. Most of the city is asleep, but one man is already awake, already moving, already working. Not because he wants to be, because if he is not gone before sunrise and the police do their first sweep of the park, he loses his sleeping spot, his blanket, and whatever small sense of safety he built overnight. The workday has already begun. He just does not get paid for it. We talk about homelessness like it is a condition, but what most people never see is that being homeless is not a state of rest. It is a full-time job. It has a schedule, required tasks, daily quotas, and consequences for failure. The only difference is that the paycheck is not money. The paycheck is surviving until tomorrow. Before we go any further, let us be clear. When most people imagine a homeless person, they picture someone sitting on a corner doing nothing, choosing this. That image is wrong. A 2022 analysis by the Department of Housing and Urban Development found that sheltered homeless people spend roughly 40% of their daytime hours in forced limbo, libraries, parks, doorways, because the shelter that let them sleep the night before locked them out at 6 in the morning and will not let them back in until 10 at night. That is 16 hours a day outside managing survival with whatever they have. And here is what that survival looks like hour by hour. The day starts in the dark, anywhere between 4 and 5 in the morning, depending on where a person slept. If they were in a shelter, the lights come on and staff begin moving people out. If they were outside, under a bridge, in a doorway, on a park bench, they wake up on their own, because sleeping too long means getting caught. This is not laziness in reverse. This is threat management. Cities run patrols and clearance sweeps of known sleeping areas. Miss the window, and you risk having your belongings confiscated or getting cited. In many cities, sleeping in a public park is technically illegal. So the first task of every day is packing up your entire life, whatever fits in a backpack or cart, and disappearing before the city notices you existed. Think about what that does over weeks and months. You never fully sleep. You never fully rest. Part of your brain is always on watch, always listening for footsteps or lights or voices. That kind of vigilance creates a different level of exhaustion than most of us have ever felt. Now it is around 6 in the morning. The city is waking up, and the first mission of the day begins. Find coffee, find food, find somewhere to use a bathroom. That sounds simple. It is not. Public restrooms in most American cities are locked, pay to use, or gone. Fast food restaurants increasingly require a purchase. Shelters and day centers, the nonprofits that offer meals and hygiene services, typically open between 7 and 9 in the morning, and many have limited capacity. Arrive too late and you wait outside. Arrive early enough and you stand in line for an hour before the doors open. The morning food run is a timed operation. You have to know which day center opens first, which church is running breakfast this week, which shelter serves a hot meal on Tuesday versus Wednesday. That takes weeks to learn. If you are new to the streets, recently evicted, or just lost your housing, you do not have it yet. You are starting from zero, in the cold, with no map. Here is something the research makes very clear that most people miss entirely. Panhandling, asking strangers for money, is not random. It is scheduled. Street Sense, a publication in Washington, D.C. that employs homeless vendors, documented that experienced panhandlers time their work almost exclusively to the 2 daily rush hours, 7 to 9 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening. Those are the windows when foot and car traffic peaks. Outside those windows, the return on time is too low to justify standing in place. So experienced homeless people do not panhandle all day. They panhandle for 1 to 3 hours at specific corners at specific times, and then they stop. That is a work schedule. That is a shift. It is practical knowledge about when to work, where to stand, and how to manage energy across the day. It just looks invisible from the outside because the person doing it does not have a desk, and the money is not income in any normal sense. On a good day in a busy urban corridor, a person might collect between $15 and $30. On a slow day, less than $5. That is the financial foundation for food, toiletries, phone charging, and whatever else the day demands. The middle of the day is the hardest part to explain to someone who has never lived it, because the hardest part is not the hunger or the cold, it is the time. After the morning tasks are done, food secured, basic hygiene managed, if a day center had availability, panhandling shift completed, there are hours left with nothing structured to fill them. Hours that must be spent somewhere. You cannot go home. You cannot sit in your car. You cannot lie down on the grass without risking a fine or removal. So people sit in libraries, they walk. They find a bench in a spot that does not attract attention. The HUD data we mentioned earlier put a number on this. Roughly 40% of the waking day spent in this suspended waiting. Not resting, not recovering, just occupying space in a city that does not particularly want you there. When safety and shelter are never guaranteed, the mind stays in survival mode permanently. That kind of sustained stress erodes judgment and accelerates physical decline. Now, here is where the economic picture comes into focus, because all of this, the exhaustion, the daily hustle, the forced waiting, exists inside a system that was built to exclude. Rental housing in the United States requires a credit check. Most landlords require a minimum credit score of 620. A person who has been homeless for months typically has no recent payment history, may have unpaid medical debt, and may have an eviction on their record. All of that lowers a credit score. And a low credit score does not just make renting harder, it makes it nearly impossible in a competitive rental market. The government offers Section 8, which provides housing vouchers to low-income renters. But even Section 8 has a credit check. A 2023 analysis found that roughly 30% of applicants were denied based on credit score thresholds alone. So the program designed to help the poorest people get housing turns away nearly 1 in 3 of them for the same financial metric that measures how reliably you paid a credit card bill. A person cannot fix their credit score without stable housing, and they cannot get stable housing without a fixed credit score. The door to housing requires a key that homelessness destroys. This is not a new problem. The mechanics of the trap are old. When the Industrial Revolution swept through England in the late 1700s and early 1800s, the Enclosure Acts privatized millions of acres of common land that peasants had used for generations. They were displaced into cities to work in factories for wages that did not cover rent. Homelessness as a mass urban condition was born from a deliberate transfer of land and resources away from the people who depended on them. The response was revealing. The 1824 Vagrancy Act in Britain criminalized sleeping outdoors. By 1850, authorities were arresting roughly 100,000 people a year under that law. They were not arresting the conditions that created homelessness. They were arresting the homeless people themselves. The problem was reframed as personal failure rather than structural consequence, and that framing stuck for 2 centuries. The same pattern repeated after the 2008 financial crisis. Subprime lenders pushed loans onto people who could not afford them, packaged those loans into securities, and sold them to investors while collecting fees at every step. When the market collapsed, banks were bailed out. Ordinary people were evicted. HUD data shows U.S. homelessness increased sharply in the years after 2008, especially among families. The system created the crisis, and the streets absorbed the cost. Let us talk about the shelter, because it is both the best and worst option at the end of the day. A bed in a shelter is not like a bed at home. A typical urban shelter houses 60 to 80 people in a single open room. You sleep a few feet from strangers. Your belongings are not secure. The noise does not stop. If someone in the room is sick, you are probably going to get sick too. And the shelter has rules, curfews, no guests, sometimes required programs that feel like one more layer of control over a life that has none left. But the street is worse. On the street, no one is watching out for you. Violence is real. Temperature is a physical threat. In the United States, exposure to cold weather kills hundreds of homeless people every year. The shelter, for all its dysfunction, at least means you probably wake up. So the evening decision, shelter line or outdoor spot, is a real calculation of competing risks. And it has to be made every day, because last night's shelter does not guarantee tonight's bed. Capacity is limited. Some nights the shelter is full and the answer is already made for you. Here is the part that the inspiring resilience framing gets wrong. The routine we have just described, the pre-dawn packing, the food lines, the timed panhandling, the forced midday limbo, the shelter lottery, is not evidence that the system is working. It is evidence that the system is failing, and individual people are absorbing that failure in their bodies, their minds, and their daily lives. A person can be disciplined, resourceful, and persistent and still not find housing, because the barrier is not effort, the barrier is financial. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in an American city now requires an income of roughly $25 to $30 an hour just to meet the standard affordability threshold. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. That gap is not something anyone can hustle across. The hustle is real, the discipline is real, but the math does not work. So why does any of this matter to a channel about money and financial systems? Because homelessness is not just a story about individuals who fell through the cracks. It is a story about where the cracks are placed on purpose. Credit scores, rental markets, wage levels, and shelter policies are all financial instruments. They have designers, they have beneficiaries, and when they function the way they do now, they produce a predictable outcome, a permanent underclass of people too economically destabilized to re-enter the housing market and too exhausted from surviving to build toward it. The 19th century factory owner needed a surplus labor pool, people desperate enough to accept any wage because the alternative was the workhouse. The modern equivalent is a city with rents too high for low-wage workers and a credit system that bars them from the housing that would let them stabilize. The mechanism has changed. The function is the same. Systems do not need malicious designers to produce harmful outcomes. They just need incentives pointing the wrong way and no one powerful enough to correct them. So the next time you see someone sitting on a corner with a cardboard sign, here is what you are actually looking at. You are looking at someone who woke up before sunrise to pack their life into a bag, who walked miles to get coffee, who stood in a food line for an hour, who worked a carefully timed panhandling shift at the right intersection during rush hour, who spent the middle of the day trying to stay warm and out of trouble in a city that would rather not see them, who is now, at the end of that day, deciding whether the shelter has space or whether tonight is another night outside. That is not laziness. That is a job. It is a job with no salary, no benefits, no path to promotion, and no way out that does not require first clearing the same financial barriers that being homeless destroys. The conversation about homelessness in this country tends to ask the wrong question. It asks, why are these people not doing more to help themselves? The more honest question is, why have we built financial systems so fragile and so punishing that a single job loss, a single medical bill, A single bad month can send an ordinary working person into a loop they cannot get out of. That question does not have a comfortable answer, but it is the one worth sitting with. If this video made you think about money and systems differently, the next one will too. We cover the hidden mechanics of financial history every week, how money works, who it works for, and what ordinary people can actually do with that knowledge. Subscribe if you are not already, and we will see you in the next one.